Steve, I'm going to read something that you wrote about yourself. Corporate storyteller, virtual host, presenter, speaker coach, writer, world traveler, avid foodie. I'm going to add singer, songwriter, musical theatre performer, and now author. So have I missed anything out?
No, you put too much in. It's the other way around.
The reason for this call with you and to record these next few sessions is this book, which I was privileged to get an advance copy of. Thank you very much. And there's so much in there, because the book is nothing gets sold until the story gets told. So we're talking about corporate storytelling. You've worked for us at Drupa to rave reviews. And what I got from that was that there's more to this than just bare words on a page. And I've written down 5 points I want to cover. And the first one is probably half of this book, which is preparation and getting ready for the big event, whatever it might be. That was deliberate when you wrote the book. Did you say, I'm going to do half this book based on preparation?
Boy, what a great place to start. It goes to the old Teddy Roosevelt quote, which is really probably not Teddy Roosevelt's. It hasn't necessarily been attached to him. It's just that people tend to think that it was him. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. I think expertise can be a block. And I notice this in my coaching and my training as well. Whoever in the room, and I can always tell who it is, if I'm working with a group of sales representatives, if I'm working with a team, typically the person who is the most resistant to new methodologies, to new approaches, to being open-minded about what we can learn, what tools we can add to our tool belt, tends to be the most expert person in the room. Because experts tend to believe, I know it. I've got this. I'm good. I don't need any outside influence. I don't need anyone else coming in, looking at what I do, judging it from an exterior perspective, because I know my customer best. I know my content best. And expertise creates a blockade. All of a sudden, we are blinded to the fact that we can always be that much better. So with that person in the room, the first thing that I'll usually do is talk to them about some sort of sport. I'll find out what their sport happens to be. I'm a skier. Okay. Well, the gold medal Olympic skier in the last Olympics won their Super G heat by 7/100ths of a second. That gold medalist, the best in the world, still works with a coach. And odds are that coach either never skied in the Olympics or wanted to ski in the Olympics but never made the gold medal podium. But they still can look from an outside perspective at what that gold medal skier is doing today and find the way for them to be that much better, that much faster, that much less wind resistant. Find that little hook that makes them that much better. And if they don't work with that coach, the silver medal skier from the last Olympics, who was 7/100ths of a second behind, in the next Olympics, they will be 7/100ths of a second ahead. And all of a sudden, that gold medal skier will be back, maybe back on the bronze side of the podium, maybe won't make the podium at all, because they were the expert. They already knew it all. So everything within the book that starts with preparation, and it's interesting that you pulled that out, that half the book really is, how do you prepare to succeed? It's so important for every one of us, and this is whether we are speaking in a public forum, like the book tends to focus on, even in a private conversation, a personal, meaningful private conversation, if it's important, if it's worth doing right, then preparing for that conversation to handle it from a strategic, intellectual methodology, open-minded, available, focused on the moment and on the other human being for their benefit, will serve us so much better than simply going off on wild emotion or just relying on our natural skills to communicate intelligently. So I really think that preparation is vitally important, and that is a very long answer to your very short first question.
But it does lead on to, what's the best way in your experience of getting the brief together of what this presentation, talk, conference speech is going to be about? Does it come from an individual sitting alone in a room with a blank sheet of paper, or does it come from a team getting together and saying, right, what do we want to achieve from this? Where do you start?
Well, it's no mystery that the larger the team, the less focused the message, the longer it takes to deliver that message. However, an individual preparing on their own is very narrow in their approach. So I would say in an ideal world, we incorporate some sort of a balance. I think the best talk is given by one individual preparing their own content, but then being willing to open up that content to maybe one or two or three other people to help influence it, to show us maybe what we might have missed or what we might add to be that much more connective, that much more human or interesting in our content. So maybe a balance between the two. But when you sit down to initially create your content, as you said a moment ago, the preparation is so vital. Most people leap to content. I need to give a talk about this particular subject, this capability at this particular event to this particular group of people. And the first thing we do is begin designing slides and begin writing down our content without thinking first, wait, I can't take a generic approach to this. Whoever I'll be speaking to, they are a unique audience with a unique set of needs. They bring their own unique perspectives and experiences to this interaction. How can I best serve them? And the best way you do that before preparing your content is to say, all right, what do they need most from me and how do I give it to them? How do I assure that I am satisfying their demands, that I am clearing obstacles out of their way, that I am making their world a better, brighter, easier place in which to work? That should inform differences in how you handle your content. So for example, if we're within a Fujifilm situation where we know, let's take drupa, since you and I have partnered on that in the past. Drupa is a very specific audience, but we are trying to appeal to 200,000 different needs and wants over the course of a drupa. That's very, very hard to do. So we have to find the common denominator. And the common denominator typically is whatever the thematic for that particular event happens to be, or the largest individual demand facing the market, or in this particular case, speaking in a particular set of language points that will affect and positively benefit the mass number of people. That is the guiding point of our storytelling, not generic, specific to that audience. And if you start from that point of preparation before you write anything, before you design any slide, you'll end up in a positive spot.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because before I hit the record button on this, you said to me, Mark, who are we talking to? Who's right. The audience that's going to watch this? And, you know, out of the three people that will watch it, then I told you who that was. So, yeah, important. So
actually, I've got 5 listed. So that's at least 2 more. You've almost doubled your audience.
Amazing. Great. I'll be really happy. So scripts, I hate scripts. Can you do without them altogether? Is it possible to just sit down, write some bullet points and go from there? Or do you need to write the whole thing out and then once you've written your whole script, come down to bullet points? Which way round is the best way to go?
So vital for anybody who speaks in public at any given time. I've got a chapter in the book, as you know, called Scripts, Friends, and Foes. The trick, the key to success in delivery is to keep the script your friend before it has an opportunity to become your foe and to get in the way. I am actually a big fan of scripts at the outset of a project. The reason is when we are processing what we want to say from a psychological perspective, there is a disconnect between what's happening in our brains, in our prefrontal cortex, as we determine what will be valuable for another person that we speak to, and what actually comes out of our mouth, our language processing skills. They don't always connect with one another. We think they do because they all live within the same body and the same mind, but they're actually 2 different things. So I am a big fan of getting ideas out of your head and onto paper or onto screen. It's the same thing that we do when we're trying to process through a crisis or a challenge. If we just think about it, we'll spin and spin and spin, and that death spiral becomes really problematic because we don't solve anything. So the great thing to do, talk about it, get it out of your head and out into public. And the best way to do that with a script or with your content is to just go ahead and write it down, type it out, whatever works. But that is not a script. All you've done now is gotten it out of your head and into a form where you can look at it, judge it, make some determinations. The next step is to organize all that big jumble of thoughts into a logical order, pyramid principle. It's this, then this, supported by this, and therefore this. Once you've done that, now you have a logical order to your information. You probably have far too much content. You've got to whittle it down. I've only got 6 minutes to speak, or 25 minutes in my session, whatever that works, and you've got to chop, 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 chop. And then you've got to figure out, where can I insert myself into all of that content? How can I tell a human story blended in with all of that content that I just laid out? Once you've done that, now, boom, script. My suggestion is, rather than wasting time revising and revising and revising and revising that script, which is a death spiral of its own that can take you right up until the minute you speak, look at it and say, okay, now that I know the top points that I want to hit, the order in which I want to hit them, and the general idea of what I want to say, learn it, get rid of it. Set that script aside, because if you hang on to it, it becomes a crutch. It becomes something that restricts you rather than opens you up to great, strong communication. Learn it, give yourself enough time. Once you feel like you know mostly what is taking place on that script, it no longer serves you. Then it becomes your enemy, it becomes your foe. So that's when I say get rid of it. So if you're worried about missing something, if you don't stick to the script, I promise you, you will never miss your most important points, because they're most important to you. The small details, the fine facts and figures that you're worried about leaving out, your audience doesn't care about them. And they won't remember them anyway. They'll go back next week remembering what you told them, and they'll research those bits on their own.
Yeah, no, I've got to the end of talking and thought, oh yeah, I didn't say that or that or that. But the talk still lasted as long as it was supposed to last. Right. And obviously, yes, subconsciously, I ditch those things. Or sometimes as you're talking, you see what's happening with the audience, and you I'm going to skip that. I'll go to the next point, because you read them, I guess. And
a lot of speakers are not that natural. They have to stick to the plan. Getting them to loosen up, look at their audience and say, I'm losing them. Let's just move on to something that's going to hook them. Or, ooh, they really seem into this. So rather than move on, let me maybe expand a bit on that, because they're clearly connecting to it. Only putting the script aside and speaking from your heart and your natural knowledge allows you that flexibility.
So what's your top tip for learning a script? When you say learn it, how do you make it stay in there? Do you play it back to yourself on a tape or something like that? Go to sleep listening to yourself talking? What do you do?
So no, never go to bed trying to learn your script. Never cram at the last moment to learn your script. Audiences can see that a mile away when you finally get in front of them. You mentioned before bullet points and how important they are. So what I always recommend to a speaker is, you've got your content. Now go back and look at it and say, all right, within that particular paragraph or that segment, what are the most salient, the most interesting points within that chunk? Give yourself 3 to 5 points within that particular section of information, maximum. Again, I think this is important. I think this is most important. I'd like them to remember this. Great. I've got 3 big ideas within a paragraph. Then whack those 3 ideas down into individual bullet points that are 3 to 5 words maximum. The idea being, I can remember that little bit, those cue words, and that's really what they are. It's not scripting, it's cues. The cues trigger in anyone who knows their topic. If you're speaking about something you don't know anything about, well, you're going to have to learn that script, because you're speaking from a point of nowhere. But if this is something that you already talk about on a regular basis, all you need is cue points to trigger your own expertise. You're good at your job.
And there is in the book, if someone hasn't got a clue where to start, then you've got a nice template in there for building up a script and some of the things you might want to cover. And it's surprising how you could make that apply to almost any kind of delivery. So that's a really good thing. I'll show that on the, while I'm talking, it will appear by magic on the screen there so people can see. one of the things I want to cover is engaging the audience. So you've got a few seconds, maybe minutes at the beginning to engage that audience and make them want to stay if it's on a trade show stand, or just to get them on side. Where do you start? What should be the first thing you say? Is it just your name and your job title, or can you open up a bit more than that?
Never start with yourself. That's trip number one. You always want to keep your focus from the very first word out of your mouth to the last on your audience and what they care about most. And the reality is they don't care about your job title. They don't care about your CV. They don't care about the company that you work for, even if they are a customer of that company or a partner of that company. You know what they care about? Themselves. And this is not a selfish thing. This is human nature. This is survival instinct. We have to look out for ourselves and what matters to us first from an evolutionary standpoint, long before we ever look at it from a corporate standpoint. So I always say begin with the audience. Never start by introducing yourself by your name, your job title, your company, your successes. Begin with them. You can get to yourself later. So that's trick number one. Trick number two is a acronym that you read in the book, PVFPVA, which stands for Prove Value First, Prove Value Always. Your audience needs to hear value to them come out of your mouth at the very beginning of your talk. And this is whether you are addressing one person in, say you're a pharmaceutical representative who has 2.5 minutes to chase a doctor down a hallway within a medical institution and try to convince them to purchase your pharmaceutical product or your piece of medical equipment. Whether you're doing that one-on-one in a speed situation or you have a 1-hour keynote in front of 20,000 people in an arena, you always want to open with value to the listener. Hook them right away by proving to them, I am here for your value, for your benefit, and you are going to walk away with so much value based on our time together. The first thing out of their mouth is that value. Prove value first. Then throughout your talk, however long it lasts, whether it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes, you need to keep rehooking your audience again and again.
That's the next point. How do we keep those people engaged? We can't, if we start off high energy, you can't just be high energy all the time. You have to surely temper it.
You do. And by the way, I should mention, this is something that I do in my training programs, especially when I'm working with European groups or with Asian groups rather than American groups. I actually put a caveat at the beginning of the training that says, I am an American. My energy level is naturally quite high. In my case, it's even quite high for an American. You're not expected to be this high level of energy. Nobody has to be this energetic. It's just my standard status. It's where I live. But energy on its own is not an indicator of successful communication. Very quiet, very reserved people can be highly successful in communication, provided they connect with one another and provide value for the person they are speaking to. So in terms of maintaining high energy across a talk, it's not so much about that as it is about continuing to prove value across a talk. Even the most intelligent person in the room is going to start to either drift from the message or get distracted from the message and need to be brought back into it. And the best way you do that is to provide value for them again, or remind them of the initial value promise that you made to them. That's the prove value always part of PVFPVA. And there are a lot of opportunities throughout even the driest talk to reinsert value. And we mentioned some of them in the book. Anytime that you get a transition point between one big idea and another is an opportunity to stop. Don't just barrel forward with your next piece of content. Stop at the end of one idea and reconnect with your audience in a way that is valuable for them and gives them a moment to process. I like to do something like, all right, I've just shown you this particular capability that I promised you at the beginning would make your job or your life a whole lot simpler, save you money, shorten your mean time to resolution, reduce stress on your personnel, your staff, whatever it happens to be. Did you see the benefit? Can you imagine how you can start to put that into action for yourself starting today, based on the investment that you've already made? And now I move on to my next big idea. You can continually rehook people with value to them again and again and again, instead of just constantly barreling through series of numbers, KPIs, data lakes, and so forth.
Do you pick out people in the audience that are engaged and try and talk to them? I do that a lot.
I do love doing that, although, let me ask you this, Mark. Do you also do my favorite thing to do, which is find the least engaged person in the audience and make them your personal pet project?
No, I just leave them in the dust.
No, to hell with them. No, I do love to do that. I love to see, can I get that person back? The person who, so let's say I'm speaking to a group of 9 executives. And of those 9 executives, I've got 3 of them who I know are fully engaged. I've got 3 who hopefully will get engaged at some point when they hear the thing that sparks their interest. And I've got 3 of them who've decided to pick up their mobiles and, and answer that vital email while I'm speaking to them. I love those people with the mobiles. It's not me. Most of the time I know it's not me. They simply have incredibly busy lives. And every moment they spend speaking to me are 5 unanswered emails that make their life harder. I get it. But I love to see if I can create value for them, hook them in.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I noticed you do at drupa, some way into the talk, was to say, we all hate so-and-so. How many people, something or other? Just raise your hand. Just to get them to wake up, I guess, yeah.
It's a great point, Mark. Querying your audience. I mentioned it earlier. How do you turn your lecture into a conversation? How do you make your audience a part of your story? The most important part of your story, because that's the reality. With what you and I are doing right now, I know I'm doing the bulk of the talking because you are interviewing me for your program. But the fact is, the star of this story is not me, and it's not you as the host. It's anybody who is watching your content right now. If you and I, are not being of value, if we're not serving the people who are watching your program at this moment, then we fail.
We've started our talk with getting people engaged, and one of the key things you talk about in the book again is passion. It's believing in what you say. But what if you've got a lot of dry facts in your presentation, a lot of numbers, quarterly results, targets for the next half year? You've got to deliver them, but you can't really be passionate about 23% sometimes. Or can you?
Oh, you can absolutely be passionate about 23%. So let's use that. I've got 2 examples that I give in the book, which again, you've seen. So let's use that. Let's use the percentages number. And then if we have time, I'll share a second story. Let's say that your job is to deliver quarterly results. That is the subject of your talk. And you're talking to your own team about how we did last quarter and what we need to do differently next quarter. Let's use the 23%. How do you feel about that 23%? Honestly, are you excited about that 23% because it outperformed expectations? Are you disappointed in that 23% because the actual target was double that at 46%? Either way, you have a stake, a personal stake in that number. Let's say it's a flat line. You expected 23%, you got 23%. That is success. However you feel about it, positive or negative, that is what you bring to your talk. Because otherwise, there's no need for a talk. I can just send out an email that says, hey, we hit 23%, we were supposed to do 38%, let's do better. Or we hit 23%, yay for us, we were only planning on 12%. I can send that out in any white paper, I can put it on my website, I can put it in documentation and let you read that on your own time. But if I'm going to tell you about it, if my boss has come to me, or my leadership has come to me, or my team has come to me and said, we want you to go talk about quarterly results, the first thought is, why do I have to talk about it instead of just send it out? The reason is you, as the speaker. You have been asked to deliver those numbers for a reason, and the reason is your personal perspective on those numbers. And if you can share how those numbers made you feel, made you proud of your team, made you disappointed because you know your team can do better, that you want to show the market how dedicated you are, and that 23% represents the nature of that dedication and how passionate you are about it and how important it is to you. That is where you can share the passion behind the number, and that's what makes that number have meaning.
Yeah. So during one of your great performances, should we call it, have you ever been heckled? Has anyone said that? But that's rubbish. I know my boss told you to say that, but or whatever. Have you had that, and how do you handle it?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. And again, like the person with the mobile in their hands, I love being challenged when I'm up in front of people. You know why? The enemy of good communication is not negativity. The enemy is apathy. It's the person sitting in front of you who couldn't care less what you're saying. If you receive pushback, argumentation, negativity from somebody out there in the room, it means they're engaged in what you're saying. They're hearing you, and they're involved in the conversation, and they want to get even more involved. That is gold for you. Don't let it throw you off, and don't let it disappoint you. The person that should disappoint you is the one who couldn't care less what you're saying one way or the other because they don't even hear it. So I use that as an opportunity to say, I love that you've just challenged me on that. I love it because it means you've got a different perspective than I do, and you have something to teach me. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk with you as soon as I am done delivering this particular talk. I would love to set up a coffee. I'll buy. Let's go. Let's talk. I want to hear what you have to say. And I want to hear why you believe that this is not the correct way to do things, or why I was just told to say this, when in fact I really do believe it, because I want to open up my mind to an alternate perspective. And you might teach me something that I can then add or change the way I speak about it from this point forward. I love that. Now, if somebody is just being a jerk, we get those
all the time. You're saying that you're looking around for security. Yeah.
That's exactly right. You know, it's frequently I have to move on. What I'll let somebody know is very, very quickly, I'll just say, thank you. I really do appreciate the commentary. Let me finish this up, and then let's have a conversation to figure out what I might be doing wrong and what you might be able to teach me. Acknowledge them, show them respect, and give them dignity in the moment, and odds are they will pipe down and allow you to continue your talk.
Okay.